thank our dear presenters. Okay, so I really appreciate the thoughtful and meaningful contribution from Travis, Heeyoung, and Jacob. Also, each of you approach the topic from different viewpoint, your ideas will equally deep and meaningful. Travis provide the transpersonal perspective. Heeyoung offer insight from a Korea feminist perspective, and Jacob discussing the topic through the lens of queer theory. Despite your different viewpoints, all of you recognize the urgent need for paradigm shift to address the ecological crisis we are facing today. So now I'm wondering, do you have a question for each other? Any question? Okay, do you have one, Travis?
I said too many.
Too many? Okay. So, okay, if you don't have a question for each other, I will first ask our presenters questions. Very simple one, don't worry about it. So then, I will open the floor to our audience for Q&A. So the question, I ask a question in the order, follow the order of a presentation. So the first question go to you. Okay, so it sounds like it has been 5 years, right? Since we last met in 2018, right? And I'm happy to see you here again in Claremont. Actually, your work in organic farming has earned my admiration, right? So, and also, we have Eco Village in China. Yeah, maybe later I will sincerely invite you to talk with our young student. So in your presentation, you share your perspective, unique perspective, known as transpersonal sustainability, TS, right? So in your paper, you argue that TS is the most effective approach to overcoming challenge and require a paradigm shift based on spirituality and self-realization. I completely agree with your view. So my question here for you is whether TS can be applied to field other than transpersonal agroecology. Yeah, why you emphasize here so much on organic farming, right? Can you apply the TS to other field? Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, no, fine. I think that's, sometimes I don't know why I do what I do. Most of the time I don't know why I do what I do. Therapy helped me learn that. And so I think that's part of why I articulated it was, given the circles that I run in, I just started to notice, even in mainstream sustainability education, people speaking to the transpersonal shift. And so, I think part of the reason that I wrote it is just to say, to invite maybe the possibility of other disciplines that are seeing the same necessity. So I'm not necessarily going to apply it outside, but I do think that it could be done. And I didn't bring it into my slides, but I start the paper with invoking Donella Meadows and Thomas Kuhn. Thomas Kuhn talks about in Structures of Scientific Revolutions, when paradigms shift, it happens when the answers in some disciplines start to answer the questions that were unsolvable in other disciplines. And so then you can, and I think that that's apparent, right, in terms of, again, metaphysics. Shifting the metaphysics starts to answer problems in all of these disciplines. And so I do think it's on that level, and the same with Donella Meadows, when she talks about the 12 places to intervene in a system, she's talking about paradigms. Like that you can do stocks and flows at the top, but as soon as you start to transform paradigms, then whole systems shift. And so I do think that the transpersonal, as was applicable in agriculture and as is applicable in sustainability, I think we could find that shift across disciplines. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah. Okay, so my second question goes to Heeyoung Jung. Yeah, you talk about the historical significance of the grandmother model, right, in farming, offering examples of mundane Lin, right, okay, and your grandmother, right, who utilized their strengths, knowledge, and wisdom to help their family and underprivileged individuals overcome the challenge of life. So I'm wondering, does this model still be effective in today's ecological crisis? Yeah.
That's good questions, and it's something weird when I talk about the new paradigm while using the old Asian wisdoms, my Korean grandmother. But I thought at first the grandmother model was 10 years ago when I was writing my master's thesis in Korea. So at that time, while writing my papers on reflecting on the Sally McPhake's works, I was just thinking about is there any suitable Korean situations models instead other than McPhake's proposed models. So first I proposed the Korean model as for the Korean as Korean grandmother who has experienced a lot of history and oppressions in her age. And then I was researching for the post-colonial example with thinking about the theme of this conference and the topic given to me. I thought these kinds of Korean grandmother or Korean grandmother's farmer could be the way of the an example, but I don't think that it could be applied for everyone, but this Korean grandmother can be an example for my community or my culture, and so that's why I think she could be the example or model or metaphors to express the the ecological civilizations. So, yeah.
Thank you. Actually, I have a lot of questions for you. But due to time limitation, I won't ask. I will ask you privately. Yeah, whenever we met later. Okay, so the question I have for Jacob. Okay, more than 50 years ago, as you mentioned in your paper, Dr. Cobb's book, Is It Too Late?, was published, and many people read it and found it is very important work. I'm grateful that you introduced the concept of ecological grief as we contemplate the need for paradigm shift. According to Whitehead's philosophy, every occasion, each drop of experience. The entire universe is comprised of those drops of feeling, including those griefs. So it is an ocean of feelings. The universe, it's an ocean of feelings. Therefore, a paradigm shift would be unattainable without acknowledging the role of the emotion and the experience in the process. I just got your paper last night. I really like it. Yeah. And now we are facing the most serious ecological crisis. In order to avoid the fate of humanity's self-destruction, every soul on the earth should awake and take action. I'm very grateful and feel very grateful that queer also joined this great movement. I have learned a lot from your presentation or paper. Since my major is Chinese traditional aesthetics, I have several questions. But okay, here I only ask you one question. Okay, I note that you mentioned that you have your own ongoing project about ecological grief. Can we know about your concrete approach to promote the paradigm shift? Can we know more about that ongoing project?
So the background for this is that in teaching undergraduate classes frequently, or in teaching in public settings, right, you speak about climate change and the energy goes out of the room because everyone's so keenly aware of the crisis. And so the question for me was, if I simply offer a new metaphysics or even a new kind of sovereign paradigm, simply as here, try this one, it's not going to lure the kind of transformation that's potentially politically possible. You can't simply say, here's the menu, choose something, because people are so already disempowered by it. And so the question for me becomes, how do you invite potential engagements with grief, not denials of it, but also acknowledge that grief does not have to be a pathway to a sense of nihilistic despair, because grieving isn't that. It's a relearning of relationality constantly over and over again. And it seems to me that the most effective grief practices are largely done through the senses of poiesis and ritual that can hold contradictory feelings and emotions that may be present. I may grieve the loss of my grandmother, for instance, but that loss is not a negative memory. It's the positive love and memory of that particular relationality for me in that particular way. So how do you invite folks to think poetically, aesthetically, in ritualized ways about the complicated places that they are, that offers agency, that offers political transformation? And I think you're seeing it in school sit-in marches, in funerals for glaciers in Iceland, and in very public sort of lamentation and play programs. But I also learned this particularly from gay liberation activists in the wake of the HIV/AIDS crises that were doing drag, that were doing die-ins, that were doing very creative and artistic. You look at a climate march, what's going on, look at all the creativity of those posters. That, to me, is embodied and transformed grief. And that's what I want in my theology. And so, yeah.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, Actually, I have some questions here, but I won't ask you. Okay, I hope I have a possibility, to talk with you after our session. Okay, thanks, Travis, Heeyoung, and Jacob. So now we invite our audience to ask our presenters question you may have.
Okay, we have time for about 2 questions. I see 1. Any other hands? I see 2.
Thank you. So in our work in psychospiritual psychotherapy, I and some of my colleagues find it absolutely crucial to distinguish between the transpersonal and the divine as distinct but intimately related domains and territories. And I think I'm hearing Travis talk about the transpersonal and Jacob talking about the divine. I know we're short of time. Maybe in 2 sentences you could each sort of celebrate something and critique something in the others, or I don't know. Do you guys see yourselves talking about similar or different things, and if so, how?
I'd have, some of the language is new for me, so I'm still processing that. What I will say is potentially what is a relational difference is our starting points. I'm looking at a lot of folks who begin with aesthetics, and you're beginning with a lot of folks who are agriculturalists, or Gus Speth being a politician, seeing actually like, oh yeah, the religious organizers and theologians and environmental ethicists and aesthetes like had it right. Oh, we're just trying to make policy change and we failed in transforming hearts and minds. So maybe the point of start is different.
Yeah, and I address this in my paper too, where like I'm inappropriately conflating like identity, spirituality, self-realization, right? Not because there aren't real differences that matter, but just as a way of trying to show, these sustainability theorists who are intimating that there's something bigger. And I don't want to alienate them by being like, well, I'm sorry, what you actually mean is like I'm just trying to like aggregate them in a way that we could say, hey, here are potential allies in terms of, this paradigm shift on a metaphysical level. And so I appreciate you bringing out that distinction, between the transpersonal and the divine, because I probably did conflate the two. Yeah.
Okay. I have a question for Jacob, but before I want to say that, Heeyoung, I think that it's such a precious connection that you have not just one Korean grandmother, but you have met several ones, and I think these people and meeting these people and learning from their approach, I think is something that we really lack. We lack masters, we lack wise people who share their experiences, and I think also Masanobu Fukuoka, which Travis mentioned, he was not a Korean grandmother, but a Japanese grandfather maybe, but maybe he was also a person like that. And I think especially the interconnectedness of nature in terms of the human-nature relation in agriculture can often only be expressed through personalities. So thank you for sharing that. My question is for Jacob, and what you said about grief, especially ecological grief, really resonated with me. I think a lot of people here in the room know this feeling, and I can totally see how this can be a transformative power, but at the same time it's also a really deep valley. And I wanted to ask you, which kind of circumstances or maybe catalysts do you think are necessary for it not to be a dump, like for it to be able to come out of the valley stronger and more motivated and somehow able to transform and transform others so that this paradigm shift can happen?
It's a great question. I probably could answer it in a few different ways. I think the one that I linger with the most is the way that theorists of ecological grief frame it as anticipated loss, and the loss of a kind of projected future, such that many of the environmentalist responses are, we have to save the planet, with that kind of like soteriology. We have to save the planet for our children and our children's children. And meanwhile, I'm saying, whose children and why human children? And the idea that there's a sort of projected telos or end goal as something that is motivating certain kinds of grief, I think is a dead end for a lot of folks. And so the way I talk about grief as a kind of theopoetic practice or as a contemplative practice is I'm really interested in the nearness of the texture of grief, because I want it to stay in the presentist moment such that it might instigate other possible futures that folks don't have to rely on the anticipated losses in that such way. Now, factually, scientifically, of course there are anticipated losses, right? There are species that will go extinct that are living in our lifetime, that we know this. But how you bear the memory of that creature, of that relation, can be bore into the future differently. Donna Haraway's end of her staying with the trouble, I think, is a really gorgeous fictionalized way of doing that. So futurity is the big thing that I start with, at least.
Let's give the final panel a hand, friends. Thank you, guys.